Hey Internet, it is Tuesday, September 21st, and you know what that means. Made in China. Greek Tuesday. This week's text is Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. The rest of the chapter, concluding from last week, minus 3 verses. We're just skipping over them because, well, they kind of seem out of the blue. That is, if you're mining the parable of the shrewd manager for that little bit of morality to make Christianity about the thing you need to do, be shrewd or something, then when Jesus suddenly starts talking about divorce, it seems a bit out of left field. Everyone who divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery, and he who marries a woman divorced from her husband commits adultery. Certainly a very clear statement about the fact that divorce is not so good. Not what you want, not happy, not good for the kids, sin. But it's not out of the blue in our context. Remember, rather than seeing all of this extended discourse as separate pieces pushed together, see it as a whole. So you've had 4 parables straight in a row. The Apollyon sheep, the Apollyon coin, the son who wishes his father was dead, and the son who wishes his brother was dead. The lying, cheating, no good, dirty, rotten, stinking thief of a manager. And then, when the Pharisees don't like anything that's being said because they wish to justify themselves and see the law as a means for attaining their own righteousness, Jesus says that any of you who apoluos your wife, who destroys your wife, same word as lost sheep, lost coin, commits adultery. Use of the law as a manner of justification has so entrenched itself in first century Pharisaical theology and culture. They had begun to believe there is a way to justify divorce. And as the final proof that Jesus slams home to them that they cannot accept the teaching of Moses, which requires first and foremost salvation by faith alone, he points out that their actions of divorce are adultery. Adultery first and foremost being faithlessness to God, which lives itself out in faithlessness to men. Or women, as the case may be. And it is on the hinge of that clear, succinct statement of condemnation, the self-justifying religiosity of those who don't want to believe Jesus' words about who he is and what he's going to do, that Jesus then tells this week's text. Probably not a parable, although the Western tradition has often seen it to be so. There was a rich man, clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's trapezoid, 4 corners of the table. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores. Now the debate springs up right here. Is this man a real man, or is it just a story, a parable? It would be the only parable in which somebody is given a real name. This gets even more scandalous when you start to think about this man's name and how unique it is. Lazarus. Sounds familiar. That guy who died and then Jesus brought back to life. The guy who had a sister named Mary, and then there's this other woman named Mary who was a prostitute who was going to be stoned and yet was forgiven by Jesus. Is there overlap? Is this one family of poor people in the area outlying from Jerusalem who believe in Jesus and know who he is? Or is it something less than that? So one of the cool things about being a confessional Lutheran is you can debate a point like this and you can come down firmly to believe on one side of it, and yet it does not affect your confession of faith and should in no way part brothers who are able to confess that faith together. But it seems pretty clear that this guy Lazarus is outside of this man's gate because that's where the scraps from the table are thrown to the dogs, and like the prodigal son lying amongst the pigs and longing for some of that food, a beggar who receives no gifts, he has gone to fight the dogs for their food and they end up licking his sores. The dog's mouth is not clean. It's a myth. This is gross. Well, this poor man dies. It's a cool word to know. Apathenesko. To die. To become putrescent. To rot. He dies and is carried by the angels to Abraham's side, wherever that is. The rich man also died and was buried. And in Hades, the Greek there is Hades, the abode of the dead. Is it limbo? We'll come back to that. And in Hades himself being in torment. Not good. Really bad. Pain, suffering, anguish. He lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. And he called out, Father Abraham, Eleazar, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the Akron, Ohio of his finger in a pool of water and come refresh my tongue, for I am in anguish in the flame. Now, no matter how we come down on the whole, where is this, what's going on, it is important to recognize that this is not the final lake of fire, Gehenna, into which the devil and all his angels and all the earth will be cast at the end of time. And this is not paradise, life eternal, resurrected in the same sense that we confess we will see when Jesus comes again to judge the living and the dead. How you go from that point on can be taken apart in various ways, and there has been no shortage of debate in the Christian church and in the Lutheran tradition. Venerable Dr. Francis Pieper has a pretty good answer to this. We'll come back to that again in a moment. Point being, no questions asked about this. Lazarus and Abraham are in a good place. This rich man is in a bad place. And Abraham says to him, Child, for he is his great-great-great-great-grandson, remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, faithlessly I might add, and Lazarus in like manner bad things, yet in faith I might add. And now he is comforted here, and you are in anguish. How can I say that this is really about whether you receive something in faith, and not about social justice or just whether or not you do good? Well, for that, you'll have to wait till the end of the parable. But Abraham continues, Besides, between you and us, a great chasm has been fixed. Greek word, there's another good one. Chasma. In order that those who would pass from here to you may not be able, none may cross from there to us. The seriousness of the judgment, the hard and fast reality that those who pursue evil in this life store up for themselves a fiery torment, and that those who are truly good are alone the ones who will be in eternity. And of course, the only one who is truly good is Christ, and only through faith in him shall any be imputed a righteousness which spares them from the flames to come. But there are flames, and there is a chasm across which none can go. There are no second chances after death. There is no reincarnation. It is given for man to die once, and after that to face the judgment. Well, so, this rich man, interestingly enough, now that finally at the end of his life, brought so low he has been forced to look up, he also then remembers his family. Even you, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, and so even he, though he was wicked, knows how to care for his brothers. He says, Send him, Lazarus, a guy I didn't even care about, to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, lest they come to this place of torment, a place so bad that even a wicked, selfish man, once he gets there, doesn't want to see anybody else come to that place. But Abraham says they have Moses and the prophets, and they must hear them. The preaching of Moses, the Torah, the prophets, the words of God, proclaiming that there is a justice, a good, and an evil, and that the answer to this justice of God is none other than the sacrificial, suffering servant, Messiah, who will come and pay for the sins of the world. They must believe that. And it's written, it is preached, it is spoken. Well, this man wants a different chance. No, Father Abraham, it is not enough that they preach and speak. They must have a sign. A wicked and evil generation asks for a sign. If someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. But Abraham said, if they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be converted, even should someone rise from the dead. And here's that hint, that shadow, which tells us that this is about more than just good and bad in you and in me. This is about the real action that will be taken by God to save mankind through the prophecies of the Torah and the prophets, pointing forward to the one who would rise from the dead. And yet, even though this truth has been seen by eyewitnesses in history, a blessed few appointed to receive a direct revelation of the risen Christ, the solidarity of these historical facts, even by modern standards of what history is and how you test it, this is not enough for the faithless heart that refuses to believe it needs to be justified by grace alone. The faithless heart prefers to find its glory in itself, to find its joy in this earth, in mammon, in money, and wealth, and heart. Again, we see this continuing build, Pharisaical tradition representing the old covenant people of God who are faithless with little, will be faithless with much. They will crucify Christ and reject his resurrection, try to cover it, try to bury it, and be vomited from the land in 70 AD by the Roman Empire. The weak, poor in spirit, those who are beggars, for we all are, and this is true. They will have good news preached to them. They will hear of the one who is resurrected. You don't need ghosts to come and tell you about it. You don't need spiritual displays of revelation. It's clear and simple as the words spoken from one to another. He is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia and amen. So even in the midst of what has been a string of very, very difficult parables with a great deal of condemnation ever growing in in their midst. The foreshadow and hint of who Jesus is and what he's done continues to bubble and percolate to the surface of the narrative. For the sake of sinners, tax collectors, prostitutes, sick men with sores on their bodies, we who are but Gentile dogs, uncircumcised, not only in flesh but in heart, how should we be saved but we believe? And how should we believe but we hear preaching? And how should preaching come but that some are apostled, they are sent? And so this word is a means of absolute, infinite, eternal grace for the sins of the whole world in the flesh and blood of Christ on that cross proclaimed to you right there, right now, today. It is finished, is enough. Baptized, you are free. You will be carried in your death by the angels to a place of safety to await the final resurrection and the life of the world to come in a paradise restored. So, finally and briefly, to the question of, is this holding place, this interim state prior to Jesus' death and resurrection, different than the heaven and the perdition, which are interim states prior to his return when resurrection happens, and Gehenna, the final lake of fire, is where all evil is cast into? That's a question that has been debated to no end, and I do like Pieper's answer. Why argue about what you cannot actually come down on when you as brothers confess one and the same gospel? That one has risen from the dead and been sent to proclaim that it has all been done in him. The mercy of God revealed in the person of his Son, Jesus Christ, the one and only, the name by which all must be saved. And that means you!